Welcome to this webinar called Master Sustainability with Ease, Use a Management System Approach. My name is Karin Ekberg and I'm the manager of the consulting company Leadership and Sustainability. Before I started my own company, I worked several years at Adidas in the role of Head of Environmental Services, and before that at other companies. I will speak a bit more about my experience later today, and at the end I will introduce you to leadership and sustainability. Today I would like to take you on a journey about management systems, their failures and their successes. We will explore the consequences of not applying a management system approach. We will have a look at the structure of management systems. We will discuss how a management system approach can help implementing your sustainability strategy. And finally, it is my intent to initiate a discussion about the need for a systematic approach to sustainability. But let's start at the beginning. In the beginning was chaos, and here I wish to use a quote from the Crow. Disorder, chaos, anarchy. Now that's fun. And it's great to be free to do as you like. It's nice to be able to decide in the instant what to do. And all of us have those moments when we enjoy living into the day. However, I don't believe that this is an effective approach to sustainability or quality. Do you? So we do have chaos in our daily lives. We do need to master complexity. All of us, when managing sustainability, have many different aspects, projects, goals, etc. on our table. However, do we need to let them swirl around in the soup of chaos? Or are there alternatives? And my statement is, in order to master complexity, we need a systematic approach. We need a common language that everyone can learn and understand. But how can we work in a systematic manner? Which questions do we need to ask ourselves, for example, when defining a climate change program? Well, I have a few examples for you here, and I have listed them actually randomly. Are you working on the most important aspects from a materiality standpoint? Do you have a policy? Do you have an organization? Do you have goals? Do you have a budget? Do you measure progress? What do your stakeholders think about this? Do you follow up to see if you are reaching your goals? Are you evaluating your results and looking for continuous improvement? And how can you communicate internally and externally? Do you have KPIs? Do you have management buy-in and support? Did you assess your risks? So those were a few examples of questions that you should ask yourself. And now let's look at the consequences of not asking those questions. And I have a few quotes for you here from real life. We have the goals, but we don't have the budget. How can we reach the goals now? We defined ambitious goals for climate change, but 3 years later we discovered that we should have focused on wastewater discharge. We don't know what we should focus on really. Many are talking about circular economy nowadays. Perhaps we should just pick that topic. Well, I run my health and safety program like this. And by the way, the different shapes you see represent the differences in the way companies organize different topics. Oh, I can't follow that setup. For chemicals, we have received goals from our external stakeholders, and now we spend thousands of dollars on analytics of wastewater. But we never find anything. We don't have a policy. We are only spending that money. But then we don't know how to address this with our stakeholders. And by the way, our program is run like this. We are in a multi-stakeholder partnership and have to report on nearly 100 different indicators for just a few topic areas, but we can't follow the logic. The indicators seem to be rather linear, and we have our own program since many years. What shall we do? We have a really great sustainability program, but our CEO never talks about it. So those were a few examples taken from real life. Let's see where that leads us. Question mark. different shapes and forms. How should this fit together? Well, don't worry. Let's just go ahead. This leads to chaos. But not only that, there may be other consequences than just chaos. So what can be the consequence? What can happen? Who knows what this is? Please tell me. Or write me. Anyone? Does anyone know? I can't see your responses, sorry. No. Okay, so anyway, yes, this is Deepwater Horizon. On April 20, 2010, the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico killed 11 platform workers and injured 17 others. It caused the Deepwater Horizon to burn and started a massive ongoing offshore oil spill that has become the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. BP has been criticized extensively and held responsible for the disaster. Much of the criticism focused on the lack of management control systems in place to prevent the disaster, but also the lack of preparation for an effective response. In all, an estimated 1,800 kilometers of shoreline were polluted, and that's more than the distance between Munich and Stockholm. This also followed other then recent BP disasters, including the Texas City refinery explosion in 2005, when 15 people died, and the Prudhoe Bay oil spill in Alaska in 2006, when over 350,000 liters were spilled. While BP often attempted to position itself externally as an environmental leader, questions persisted regarding its environmental performance, and the recurring events raised questions as to whether these were one-time events or systemic, and whether sustainability was really a critical part of the fabric and operations of the company. How could this happen? The company had a sustainability strategy. They were explicit about their commitment to sustainability in their communications, but it does not appear to have been successfully integrated throughout the fabric of the company, and it does not appear that the company built an organizational culture that motivated decisions that were sensitive to potential social and environmental impacts. So the lack of consideration and integration of these potential impacts can clearly lead to disaster. So a sustainability strategy, it's only a minimum enabler. To truly integrate sustainability into the organization, companies must support it with appropriate organizational structure, develop systems for measuring and reporting, and exercise leadership to reinforce these objectives throughout the organization. And finally, build an organizational culture that motivates sustainable decision-making and behavior. So what are the conclusions here? Well, in order to explore them, I would like to tell you some stories. I wish to give you 3 different examples of mindset and about paradigms. And the first one is about end of pipe versus integration. And when I started my career more than 30 years ago, and I'm a chemical engineer, I was very fortunate because I actually landed in an environmental job from the beginning. I worked in a Swiss company building water and wastewater treatment plants. It was my job to design the plants, oversee the construction, and sometimes even to take them into operation. A few years later, I joined an environmental consultancy in Bern in Switzerland. I worked on some really large projects. One was to build the treatment plan for the leakage water from the largest toxic landfill in Switzerland. Another one was to clean up a dioxin-contaminated site. I was sent to Brazil to support cleaning up landfills. I made waste handling concepts, air emission projects, and much more. But what was I actually doing? Well, I was working on end-of-pipe projects, taking care of the damage. But towards the end of the 1980s, this would change. There would be a change in paradigm. And one thing that happened was in 1986. I don't know if any one of you know what happened. It's actually the Europe's worst environmental disaster for that decade. But I will read the headline for you. Chemical spill turns Rhine red. There has been a catastrophic fire at a chemicals factory near Basel, Switzerland, sending tons of toxic chemicals into the nearby river Rhine and turning it red. The fire broke out early this morning in a storage building used for pesticides, mercury and other highly poisonous agricultural chemicals. The leak at the Sandoz factory was Europe's worst environmental disaster for a decade. Within 10 days, the pollution had traveled the length of the Rhine and into the North Sea. An estimated 500,000 fish were killed, and some species were wiped out entirely. And by the way, Sandoz doesn't exist individually anymore. It's today a part of Novartis. And one of the results of this catastrophe was that the Swiss ordinance about chemicals risk management, the so-called Störfallverordnung, was developed. This ordinance required all companies handling chemicals to make an inventory and a rough risk assessment, and in a second step, a detailed risk assessment. So such studies were added to my work portfolio. And now this is an example of the paradigm shift. We went from just managing end of pipe, i.e. cleaning up, to developing risk assessments, thereby preventing damage. And a bit later, the development of the EMAS, the European Eco Management and Audit Scheme, started, as well as the development of ISO 14001 for environment. So now we are at the beginning of the 90s. And now I got really hooked. The minute I had understood that concept, I was hooked with the management system approach. The entire mindset was and is to understand and prevent, to manage the actual processes, to manage the input into the processes in order to minimize the end-of-pipe pollution. So this is at the core of the ISO management system standards, and for me it was a completely new paradigm. Now the other example I would like to make is from 2011. This may not be so true for the outdoor industry as much as for the sporting goods and the fashion industry, but these industries had used RSLs, restricted substances lists, for years, seeking to help protect consumers by restricting the amount of toxic chemicals that were allowed on the final product. Obviously, you need to manage the manufacturing processes in order to achieve those limits, but it doesn't need to be the focus, and you may still use hazardous chemicals in the manufacturing processes as long as they are washed out or have reacted before you sell the product to the consumer. But then came the Greenpeace detox campaign and challenged some brands to manage wastewater in the supplier factories as well as chemicals use. And for many in those companies, it was a huge challenge to think beyond RSLs. But actually, what this is really about is again the integrated approach to managing inputs to your processes and your processes themselves in order to minimize the output. Another example, and this is not so much about the mindset, but much more about the actual manufacturing processes. I recall discussions we had when we developed the first version of the SAC Sustainable Apparel Coalition, the facility module, the factory module for environment. And someone had the idea to ask suppliers to improve all environmental aspects at the same time. Let's say reduce the wastewater volume, reduce the load of pollutants and the sludge from the wastewater treatment, all at the same time. But a management approach to understanding your processes will tell you that it's very unlikely that you can succeed in improving all those three at the same time. Why? Well, they actually influence each other. If you change one parameter, then the other ones will be changed too, but not always in the same direction, i.e. not always will you be able to improve on all at the same time. And So now a final conclusion at this time, and this is more general. This is an important aspect when it comes to implementing sustainability programs successfully. And it's about engaging with your management and clarify the process approach with them in order to be successful. Most CEOs acknowledge its importance, but the challenges of implementing sustainability strategies are still quite significant and not always well understood by managers. Now let's turn back to the Deepwater Horizon case for a moment and talk about the consequences. What were the consequences of the Deepwater Horizon accident for BP? Well, BP has lost a good reputation. By 2011, the company had lost almost a quarter of its market value and had paid over $40 billion in costs associated with the cleanup and recovery. They had settled for another $20 billion US dollar. So in total, BP has had costs of at least $60 billion US dollar plus the loss in market value. And in 2015, shortly after BP released its own 5-year report that concluded the Gulf has largely recovered, the trustees of the Natural Resource Damage Assessment, they called BP's report inappropriate as well as premature. Very tough, very tough. But now, let's dive into the organizing structure of management systems. And at a higher level, I will continue to talk about mindsets. This is all about mindsets and about paradigms. And of course, we will also talk about standards. And at a more detailed level, we will talk about the following topics: principles, processes, a framework for continuous improvement. We will talk about a standardized structure and process to all aspects. We will talk about the unified high-level structure, which is the new ISO structure for all their management system standards. The ISO 9001 Quality Management Series builds on 7 quality management principles, such as customer focus, leadership, evidence-based decision-making, and relationship management. And to the left, you can see some of the stakeholders that need to be considered and involved when implementing an ISO 9001 and or an ISO 14001. ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 were revised significantly in 2015, and some of the areas that now have more emphasis are risk management, change management, and leadership involvement. One of the quality management principles is the process approach. But this is applicable to also to ISO 14001 and sustainability aspects. In order to have a good structure, we usually work along the value chain. On this slide, you see a very detailed representation of the value chain, and of course it can look different for different companies. At the top of the slide, we have the overarching management processes, and below we have the actual business processes, where the products and services are actually created, distributed, and sold. And finally, we have the support processes, for example, human resources and communication. And once you have your value chain and your processes mapped, you can assess where you may have quality and sustainability impacts, risks, and opportunities. Another quality management principle is improvement. By applying the plan, do, check, act cycle on any area in your business, you can improve continuously. So what are the benefits? Well, it supports project management, it helps integrate change management, and it helps identify the means to close the gaps between where you are today and where you would like to be. And it helps drive continuous improvement by repetition, the plan, do, check, act cycle. And now let's put the plan, do, check, act cycle into the ISO standards high-level structure. And imagine you take any sustainability or quality aspect and you push it into the funnel here to the left. And through the plan, do, check, act activities, i.e. through the same approach, To the left in the funnel, you see the 4 ISO management system standards that may be relevant to your business. ISO 9001 for quality, ISO 14001 for environment, ISO 50001 for energy, and ISO 45001 for health and safety. And this one is not yet published, but is well underway to its publication and finalization. And of course, we also have ISO 26000 for social responsibility that also could be applied here. And now let's look at the 10 elements of the high-level structure. Previously, the different management system standards had similar elements, but they were not aligned in their structure. So companies wishing to implement more than one standard would find it difficult to do this in an integrated manner. It was difficult to harmonize the system. And so, therefore, in 2012, ISO decided that all management system standards shall use the unified high-level structure, HLS. So now they all have or will have the same structure, the one you can see here to the left with the 10 sections. So every management system standard has the same list of content at this level, which are those 10 chapters. And the main advantages are a much improved compatibility of the standards, and it's much easier to integrate and add additional standards into an existing management system. And also the effectiveness in standard implementation has also improved. And let me now walk you briefly through the different sections. The first 3 are specific to the respective subject you are managing. And then the 4th, the context of the organization, means understanding the needs and expectations of stakeholders, understanding which aspects that are material to your business, and identifying relevant risks and opportunities. To ensure a systematic approach and true business integration of sustainability strategies, leadership involvement is required. 1, to initiate change. 2nd, to inspire a shared vision. And 3rd, to drive organizational culture changes. In the 2015 versions of both ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, the emphasis on leadership ownership is even stronger than before. This means that the leadership, they cannot delegate the responsibility to someone else. They can delegate the daily work on the system, but not the responsibility. The planning brings risk-based thinking to the front. In short, the organization needs to decide how to address the significant aspects, risks, and opportunities. It also must make a list of all legal and other requirements that it needs to comply with and build the system so that they can prove that they are compliant. And this is a task that should not be underestimated. The effect is immense. The organization will be able to adhere to laws and regulations and other requirements in a systematic, not haphazard manner. With support, we are talking about resource needs, the required competences and trainings of people to make sure they can fulfill their roles, and we are also providing guidance for documented information. The operations section requires the organization to describe clear instructions to control their processes, requires documented proof, drives transparency and risk management of outsourced processes, and encourages better environmental performance of suppliers. The sections 9 and 10, they are really important in the system because they ask the users to analyze their system and evaluate if they are reaching their goals and if the system is appropriate for the business. So we have content that covers target orientation, process compliance, gives the organization the freedom to determine what and how to monitor, measure, etc. Internal audits and management reviews. External audits also provides independent assurance. At Adidas, when we implemented ISO 14001, we started with implementing ISO 14001 for the headquarters and a few additional locations at the beginning. And then we expanded with 1 to 2 locations every year. And today Adidas has more than 10 locations with an ISO 14001 certificate. And in our work with the management review, that we conducted twice a year was a very important tool. The management review was the opportunity for us to look back at successes and failures and summarize how we wanted to move forward in order to improve, and also put this into a package that we could communicate at a high level to our management. Section 10 ensures that there is always a focus on improvement. It drives continual improvement of the overall performance of the organization, and it provides the tools to drive continuous improvement with the plan, do, check, act cycle. Previously, with the older versions of the management system standards, you often heard that they ask for a lot of documentation and that there was a risk of having a lot of administration because all of this documentation, etc. But this has changed. The new 2015 versions of the standards ask you to document only what is needed for you to run the system effectively within your business and to be able to prove your results. Nevertheless, here is a proposed hierarchy of the documentation. At the top, you have the overarching manual, and this is not a requirement anymore from ISO. This would be voluntarily, but I actually recommend having a manual that keeps everything together. Next below, you have the policy level, and then the procedures where the way to run a certain process is described. And then we have the more detailed work instructions, perhaps in a workflow. And finally, we have records. So now let's bring all of those pieces together. The core of your business are your processes, the management, business, and support processes. And then you have the quality and sustainability aspects that you wish to manage, like the aspects within ISO 14001, ISO 9001, etc. Potentially also from ISO 26000, the standard for social responsibility, as well as the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. You apply the plan, do, check, act approach, and finally you document what you wish to do and what you do. And voila, here you have your system. And now I would like to mention one good example. This document is the Chemical Management System Guidance Manual from the ZDHC, Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals. Its scope is only chemicals, but it is a nice example of how to apply a management system approach. It's a really well-written document, and it's not so easy to find good examples online. So if you are looking for an example of what this could look like, you can read this one. And now, finally, I will cover the benefits of management systems, and then we will have time for questions and a discussion. So here are some of the benefits. Applying a management system approach to managing sustainability provides a standardized structure and process that can be applied to any aspect: quality, sustainability, environment, energy, etc. Enables to add aspects when they become relevant, and helps to identify aspects that matter to stakeholders, supports the organization in identifying and managing risks and opportunities that matters, makes top management accountable, drives an organization to provide the required competences and trainings of people in order to reach the goals and maintain the system, helps to communicate how the organization is performing in sustainability, encourages suppliers and service providers by integrating them into organizations' business systems, and provides an independent assurance service to stakeholders, will continually improve the organization's effectiveness and provides a set of principles to follow, and ensures a systematic and structured approach to legal monitoring and compliance, and finally saves costs and increases sales. And I hope I have given you a good overview of the management system approach and something perhaps to consider for your own programs. So now let's open the floor for questions or remarks. Do you have any questions for me? Let me see. I can't see your questions. Teresa, can you see the questions? Here. Here. Okay, one question here is, I concur that mindset and culture play a key role in terms of environment, health and safety, but I have doubts whether management systems have a key influence on mindset and culture. And yes, Ivo, of course, you are right. It's not done just with the system. You need to actually really live the system. But in my view, when you do that, you should be able to engage with management and also with everyone in the company to build that culture. So of course, change management is needed in order to do that. All right. Any other questions? Here is another question. How does management systems improves working of an NGO? Do you mean by implementing a management system within the NGO itself? Yes. Okay. Well, I think that for an NGO, exactly like for a company, it is a tool to work in a more structured and systematic manner. So obviously the content of the system will be different for an NGO depending on which aspects that are really important for you. And perhaps for some NGOs it would be important also to implement an ISO 9001, and perhaps they refrain from an ISO 14001, depending on which areas they think are important. But certainly, I think that a management system can be effective for NGOs as well. And also, by the way, I didn't mention this, but I am not the opinion that you always have to certify according to a system. I think the approach, the management system approach is the most important. If you certify or not, that's another question. Let me see. And then the question, if I see the trend towards integrated systems continue, yes, I think so, absolutely. And now since we have this decision about the high-level structure, it would be so much easier for companies to integrate their systems. And I think it's really not effective to have separate systems. Mm-hmm. There is one question. I'm not sure I'm really clear on what you mean. Perhaps you could explain where would you put the purpose and identify a company as a more larger approach to an execution framework? I'm not sure I understand that question. If you could just explain it. The purpose of a company is key. Yes, so that's part of the development of the system when you develop your policy. And you do that based on the context and the assessments that you have done. And then obviously the purpose of the companies is part of that, or should be part of that, and inform the system and the policy development. Okay, great. I hope I covered your questions. Anything else? All right. Then we will continue. Thank you so much for the questions. I have some more information for you, but it's time to wrap up. And I have some information about my company that I wish to briefly present to you. At Leadership and Sustainability, we promote sustainability as corporate strategy, sustainability as business model, and sustainability as leadership quality. And you can see our team of excellent experts here to the right on the slide. And we cover a broad range of solutions, and therefore we work in partnerships globally, and we work also with clients in Europe, Asia, and Americas. The services we provide specifically related to management systems are, for example, supporting you with the decision making about implementing an ISO or any other management system. We deliver workshops and trainings. We can help map your business processes, and we can also help you develop your management systems together with your teams. And on this slide, you can see a few of the projects we have been and are working on currently. We work on classical strategy projects, conducting materiality assessments over the entire value chain and/or the supply chain, and thereby identifying impacts, risks, and opportunities. We support brands and retailers with chemical management projects. We work with our clients to develop their supply chains. We deliver workshops about strategy, about ISO and other topics. We conduct verification visits and environmental impact assessment at factories. And we also do research on different topics for our clients. It may be a topic that is evolving and that is, so to say, a hot topic at the moment. And so, yes, please contact us if you wish to engage further. And before I say goodbye, I wish to inform you that there will be a survey with 4 questions, only 4 questions available after this webinar. And we are very grateful for your input to that survey. And thank you so much for joining us today. And goodbye for now.